Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. According to the Smolensk crash investigating body, on the 10th of April 2010, the Polish plane carrying the president and his entourage suffered an act of unlawful interference in the construction of the plane, which in simple English means that an explosive device or devices were planted inside the aeroplane. The report published today states that first the left half wing exploded and later the centre plane. The committee chairman, Antoni Macierewicz, former opposition leader, member of parliament and minister of defence, announced today that the main and indisputable evidence of Russian interference was the explosion in the left wing of the plane before it passed the birch tree. The subcommittee precisely identified the place, time and sound of the explosion that destroyed the wing and initiated the crash. Its continuation was another explosion in the centre plane several metres above the ground, which destroyed the entire plane and killed the Polish delegation headed by President Lech Kaczynski. 5 arguments were listed as confirming the explosion in the wing. Copies of recordings from CVR, MLP, ATM, results of the Aviation Institute and Army Institute of Technology, experiments with Tu-154 models, numerical analysis of the millisecond sound of the explosion, transcripts from CVR recordings made by the Institute of Forensic Studies and ABW in 2021, explosion experiments made by the Commission. Antoni Macierewicz indicated that the explosions were preceded by 2 disinformation operations, introducing chaos among the flight controllers of the Russian Federation and making it difficult for the Polish crew to leave for the reserve airport in Vitebsk. It is about a last-minute change of reserve airports from Vitebsk to Domodedowo and Shemeretowo, which are 1 hour's flight away from Smolensk, made by the Russians and hidden from the Polish pilots, and the erroneous descent of the aircraft in such a way as to put it at risk of hitting the ground. The report may be the basis for international action. The head of the subcommittee did not rule out a complaint to the European Court of Human Rights. The report's appendices contain mostly technical issues and legal and film documentation. Today, the decision to invalidate the 2011 report of the Commission of Jerzy Miller was also upheld. Evidence was not only left by Donald Tusk's government at the disposal of the Russian Federation, but was also concealed, destroyed and falsified. The Russian side clearly stated that Poland would not receive the evidence, and the conditions of receiving these materials to this day, with the consent of the Republic of Poland, are to accept the report of Mrs. Anodina. The subcommittee found the presence of explosives on many parts of the Tu-154M plane, used among other things in thermobaric charges. According to the report, the catastrophe may be characterized as a bombing. The tremendous effort of the dozens of scientists, universities that have been involved in this research makes it the best studied disaster in the world. Today, it is the responsibility of the Polish elite to familiarize themselves with this report and to take a position on it. This line will divide us into traitors and patriots, because we cannot stand in the middle when it comes to the murder of the president. According to the subcommittee's findings, most victims have identifiable injuries resulting from the explosion. On the 10th of April 2010, 96 people, including President Lech Kaczynski and his wife, died in the Tu-154M plane crash in Smolensk. Just yesterday, during the celebrations of the 12th anniversary of the crash, Deputy Prime Minister Jarosław Kaczyński announced that there was a big change in the explanation for the crash. Russia has not changed. Russian post-communism is as criminal as communism. Today we know what happened. We have this answer, verified by many centres. This will be put before public opinion in the near future. The subcommittee made a number of recommendations, including the establishment of a unit to deal with the flights of the most important people and pyrotechnical checks of aircraft after each overhaul. The same applies to extensive counterintelligence checks on the occasion of such overhauls. The 47th day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In the village of Buzova, near Kiev, a mass grave was found with the bodies of civilians killed by Russian soldiers. The occupation forces killed at least 50 villagers. This is yet another symbol of the brutality of Russian soldiers after the murders in Buzova and Kramatorsk. President Volodymyr Zelensky has conveyed that Russia has already destroyed hundreds of infrastructure facilities that provided for normal economic and social life in Ukraine. Russian missiles and aircraft destroy all storage facilities, food supplies, airports, railway stations, factories and universities. Already, 938 educational institutions and almost 300 hospitals have been destroyed. The occupiers are deliberately destroying residential areas and entire cities. In the village of Buzova, Near Kiev, a mass grave was found with the bodies of civilians killed by Russian soldiers. The occupation forces killed at least 50 villagers. This is another symbol of the brutality of Russian soldiers after the murders in Buzova and Kramatorsk. The Russians tortured them and threw them into the water. Monsters. They deserve no other name. The victims disappeared on the 16th of March. Many buildings have been completely destroyed. Nobody knows how many bodies are under the rubble. Some say there are 150 people lying there. There were more than 20 people in each block. Single-family houses were also destroyed. The bullet hit directly into the house. We were in the cellar. Grandfather, small child, daughter-in-law. We jumped out of the basement and ran in front of the eyes, and the Russians were shooting at more houses. A French detachment of scientific and technical gendarmes arrived in Ukraine today and will assist the services there to document war crimes. In the Kiev region, despite the destruction, farmers are trying to sow fields, but most of them still need to be demined. In the Kharkiv region, on the other hand, authorities warn residents against delayed action mines. Russian army losses include 19,500 soldiers, over 1,900 combat vehicles, and 725 tanks. According to the information of the General Staff of Ukraine, the Russian army continues to create formations of troops to attack in the Kharkiv and Donetsk directions. The most difficult fighting is taking place near the port and the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol.
Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki met Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo in Warsaw today. The heads of both governments discussed the war in Ukraine, as well as the consequences of the continuing conflict for European countries. The current sanctions against Russia and their tightening was another important topic discussed.
We appeal to the European Commission to ensure that since it helped Turkey during the previous refugee crisis, it should also help us, and that Poland should receive aid from the European Union budget since, up to now, we have financed everything ourselves. However, for justice to be done, we are conducting an increasingly intensive dialogue with the European Commission on this matter. We are prepared to do more. We need a sixth or even a seventh package of sanctions to make it even more difficult for Russia to access financial markets. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to address national assemblies. This time he spoke to the South Korean parliamentarians. One cannot hope that Russia will stop on its own. You cannot hope that reason will win out and the Russian leadership will give up waging war. Russia can only be forced to seek peace, to stop destroying and torturing people, to respect the opinions of its neighbours. You know very well what it means to fight for your land, because in the 1950s, those who wanted to destroy your freedom and your identity came to you. You fought and the world supported you, and now we expect the same. Meanwhile, a meeting of the foreign ministers of the European Union member states is underway in Luxembourg. Even before the summit began, the EU foreign policy head, Josep Borrell, addressed accusations that sanctions imposed on Russia would lead to a humanitarian crisis in Africa. Ministers also discussed increasing the fund for the purchase of arms for Ukraine, as well as the embargo on Russian raw materials. As the German federal government, we have made it clear that there will be a complete weaning off of Russian fossil fuels, starting with coal and then oil and gas. In order for this to be implemented together across the European Union, we need a common coordinated plan for the complete phase-out of fossil fuels.
We now have coal as part of a sanctions package. We know that the Commission is also now working on a future package that we hope we can see soon that will involve oil as well. And the European Union is spending hundreds of millions of euros on importing oil from Russia.
President Putin has failed morally in this war. It's driving his country into isolation because of its serious responsibility for human rights violations. And the global community is already watching. Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko spoke about the need to increase arms supplies to Ukraine during an interview with the American ABC TV network.
There are two major issues and points. First, and mostly, we need weapons. We cannot defend our country with our fists. We need weapons to defend our country. Second, isolation, economical isolation of Russia.
The Ukrainian authorities' appeals are not going unanswered. United States President's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has announced that the US intends to equip Ukrainian troops with the necessary equipment.
The images that we've seen out of Bucha and other cities have been tragic, they've been horrifying, they've been downright shocking, but they have not been surprising. We, in fact, before the war began, declassified intelligence and presented it, indicating that there was a plan from the highest levels of the Russian government to target civilians who oppose the invasion, to cause violence against them. The bottom line is this: there must be accountability. And the United States will work with the international community to make sure there's accountability. In the meantime, though, we're not going to wait for that. We are going to get Ukraine the weapons it needs to beat back the Russians, to stop them from taking more cities and towns where they commit these crimes.
One of the important topics discussed internationally last week was the expansion of NATO to include Sweden and Finland. Today, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov spoke on the issue, calling the initiative an escalating war. We have repeatedly said that the alliance remains a confrontation-oriented tool. NATO is not an alliance for peace and stability, and its further expansion will not bring additional security to the European continent. The first serious consequence of Western sanctions on Russia is the insolvency of the Russian state railway. The company has technically become bankrupt. One rating agency has downgraded Russia to SD, which means that it treats the whole country as potentially bankrupt. According to the World Bank, Russia is facing a severe recession.
And finally, the results of the first round of the French presidential election. Incumbent President Emmanuel Macron won with 27.84% of the vote. In the second round, he will face National Unity candidate Marine Le Pen, who received 23.15% of the vote. Third place went to Jean-Luc Mélenchon with 21.95%. The decisive poll will be held on the 24th of April. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.